It's an infinite inning holiday mini episode. Well, hello there, and happy Christmas to you, or happy day after Christmas, if that is your holiday. And as many have pointed out, there is both a secular and non-secular Christmas in America. You don't have to be Christian to participate in the mood, the spirit that so many songs and movies have promoted over the decades, the centuries. A Christmas Carol or The Grinch, they work even if the Savior is not invoked directly in them. In both cases, they're about characters who have lost their humanity and their empathy, and via their encounter with the spirit of the day 3 times, sort of literally in Scrooge's case, they rediscover it again. Have they had a spiritual awakening, to use that word again? Absolutely. Have they had a specific religious awakening? Not necessarily. And that's why when you see more evangelical, more fundamentalist groups say, let's put the Christ back in Christmas, that should apply to some people. I can see why it would apply to some people, but it doesn't need to apply to all. And I would argue, and I realize as someone who's not part of that religion, that my opinion may not be welcome. I may seem like an unmarried marriage counselor in this instance, totally unqualified. Although I will say that though I come from a predominantly Jewish family, due to intermarriage, I have had my fair share of Christmas holidays with the family where there was a tree to make other people feel welcome, where there wasn't just a menorah. There were also presents and candy canes and so on. So I know a little bit about the power of the experience and the warmth you get from participating in it. And that, in part, is why I say that those who take a strict, rigid, fundamentalist approach to the holiday are snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. Not because it has been changed, the birth of the Savior, into a civic holiday that doesn't have a religious principle, but because it has become so accessible as a national holiday, as an American holiday, through the culture, through the contributions that so many have made. 'Twas the night before Christmas. Yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Beach Boys, Little Saint Nick. Bruce Springsteen's version of Santa Claus is coming to town. The Pogues' Fairy Tale of New York, which somehow I got through the entire 24 hours of the holiday without hearing this year, so I'm going to have to rectify that. Irving Berlin, a Jew writing White Christmas. Not only because he was a pro, you give him an assignment, he's going to write a good song about the topic. It could have been about Camembert cheese, which Cole Porter invoked every other song. I don't know why. Easy rhyme, I guess. Famous story, Rodgers and Hammerstein were originally approached to make the musical Annie Get Your Gun about Annie Oakley. They said, no, we've kind of been there, done that with Oklahoma. How about Irving Berlin? So Irving Berlin took on the job with Rodgers and Hammerstein as producers. So Irving goes off for a while, writes a bunch of songs, comes back with the 11 o'clock number, There's No Business Like Show Business. Now a standard. And Irving plays it for Richard Rodgers, and Richard Rodgers was a cold, cold fish. So Irving Berlin says, what do you think? And Richard Rodgers says, yeah, it's all right. By which he meant great. But Irving Berlin thought he hated it. All right, fine, it's out of the show. Wait, what? Why? I digress. Beyond that, beyond professionalism, why were those Christmassy emotions so accessible to Irving Berlin? Because as a Jew and an immigrant to this country, he could see how it was part of participating in the national community, which I would argue he loved as much or more as many people whose ancestors came over on the Mayflower. So I think those that say, first you have to accept all the religious stuff, then you get your candy cane, not the other way around, I think they've got it backwards. No doubt many of you are more educated on this subject than me, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but if I remember correctly, in the very early days of Christianity, when many of the original apostles were still around, and the apostle Paul, who came later, was starting to proselytize to the Gentiles, he had a problem with circumcision. At that point, it seemed like Christianity would be a new iteration on Judaism rather than its own thing. And so the OG apostles, remembering a line that ends up in Matthew chapter 5, verse 17, in which that fellow from Nazareth said, I've come to fulfill the law, not abolish it. And thus the OG apostles said, look, we have to keep this symbol of the covenant, which circumcision is. It's really important. It's central. And Paul, Saul of Tarsus, said, look, it's a deal breaker for a lot of people. If it happens to you as a baby, sure, you don't remember it. But an adult, it's pretty intimidating. And they're pretty protective of the candy cane. Let's call it the candy cane, just to be polite, because there are some women in the room. They're protective of the candy cane. They don't want any damage to their candy cane, but they'd be willing to hear the message if you just let it go. And eventually, he got his way on that. And so I think let the public square be the public square. Let it be as welcoming as it can be to the largest number of people. And they don't need to feel like they're betraying their ancestors or their beliefs by having sort of a casual dabbling with what other people believe. And if it resonates with them, then great, they'll find their own way to it. But if you make it so you have to go through some 20-step initiation before you can exchange presents under a tree, or that saying happy holidays is some sort of transgression when you don't say Merry Christmas or Happy Birthday, big guy, I think that's forbidding to people. It's unwelcoming. And on that note, I would like to welcome you to this holiday episode. Slightly shorter because it is a short week for everybody. Same with next week, with New Year's Eve, New Year's Day falling right in the middle of the week. But the week after that, I'll be back to trying your patience with an episode that runs somewhere between 45, 50 minutes and an hour, as usual, low these many years. I do hope you have been enjoying the first of those 2 short weeks, and that no drunk uncles befouled your tables with rude lines of conversation. Seriously, how much you starch your shirts is no one's business but your own, no matter how much that's discussed in certain corners of social media. Who am I to say 7.5 minutes in? I have not said it yet. I am, as ever, Stephen Goldman, your convivial host, your congenial host of The Infinite Inning, 357 episodes, and going strong. I personally had a quiet holiday, and glory be, it had some baseball in it, completely by accident. Made me really lonely for the regular season to return. One film that's been on my long-time to-watch list is the 1946 fantasy A Matter of Life and Death, one of many highly regarded films by the writing, directing, producing team of Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger. More about whom in a second. I have a number of films churning in my head that I've not seen. Sometimes with certain titles, they're right in the front of my mind, and other times they kind of drift back and recede in favor of other things. And then I'll be working here, I'll be writing up some story, and suddenly it will pop into my head, hey, I still want to see that. And then I'll say to myself, what are the odds that one of my streaming services or Turner Classics Movies has happened to add that since I last checked for it? And the answer is almost always no. But on Christmas morning, I was sitting in my easy chair, I was drinking my mug of coffee, and it popped into my head, in part because I was thinking about It's a Wonderful Life and A Christmas Carol and films like that, and I thought that It's a Matter of Life and Death was sort of analogous to it. And I thought, if there's a time of year that someone will show this movie, surely it will be today. So I pick up my phone, I type in TCM schedule, and it was showing that night, 8 o'clock on Christmas night. So I made myself an appointment with the television, and I watched the film. And I was both right and wrong in what I expected. And I should pause and say that Powell and Pressburger, also known as the Archers, that was the name of their production company, were British filmmakers. They made a whole bunch of movies in the 40s and 50s. I honestly have not seen the majority of them, even though many are very highly regarded. The long-running Sight and Sound poll has their film A Canterbury Tale, which is a romantic comedy, not out of Chaucer, At number 243, I Know Where I'm Going, I think also a romantic comedy, tied for number 196. And they're The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp and Black Narcissus, two different films, tied at 169th best all time. A Matter of Life and Death is in the top 100 at number 78. It ranks equally with, among others, Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times and Billy Wilder's Sunset Boulevard. And then their highest ranked film, The Red Shoes, is up at 67. Maybe I am a Philistine, but I have avoided that one because the ballet setting just doesn't interest me that much. In fact, it alienates me. However, I've seen Black Narcissus a couple of times, and it's fantastic. A very colorful color film from 1947 in which some nuns are asked to set up a school in a remote corner of India and find out that they can't cope with the environment and isolation. It's not properly classified as a horror film, but it's this close. It's a film of psychological anxiety, I think, whatever genre you would call that. And it stars Deborah Kerr, who you might remember from the film version of The King and I, or Making Out on the Beach with Burt Lancaster in From Here to Eternity. A Matter of Life and Death is a lot lighter, but it's special in its own way. And as I said, I thought it was about someone having to justify their right to live based on their moral and emotional decisions, which they would have to defend or else get flushed in some cosmic sense. So I was anticipating something between A Christmas Carol, It's a Wonderful Life, and perhaps Albert Brooks's Defending Your Life, a very underrated film in my opinion. And gee whiz, is Meryl Streep radiant in that film. I read somewhere that Brooks just told her to be as she was when she was off the screen. And if that's what her character is really like, then we've all been very deprived not to be good friends with Meryl Streep. I was close, but not really on target because the film is very different. It's very original. And it's not a story where someone is hanging between life and death and some celestial judge has to be persuaded as to whether they deserve to go on living or they are going to pass away, or even they have passed away and now some heavenly decider has to direct them either upwards or downwards. It's not that at all. The movie is asking a whole lot of questions, actually. I would say the main one is love more important than bureaucracy? David Niven plays a British bomber pilot who is forced to bail out of his plane sans parachute. He knows he's going to die, and before he goes, he makes one last radio contact with an air traffic controller, an American woman played by Kim Hunter, who you know from later when she was older. If you've ever seen one of the original Planet of the Apes films, you at least know her as a chimp. She's in 3 of them. If you've ever seen the Brando Streetcar Named Desire, she got an Academy Award for being Stella in that one. And they have a conversation which alone is worth the price of admission to the film. If it had ended after those 10 minutes, I would have been very satisfied. It was very moving. However, Niven inexplicably survives the jump, finds Kim Hunter, and nigh instantly they fall in love. Meanwhile, the bean counters of the afterworld realize he should be dead. He should have moved on to the next stage, but he got missed, and they feel obligated to rectify the situation and meet their quotas. But Niven and various allies he gathers along the way argue that he should have a chance to live out his love story. That his discovery of love, despite the fact that it came in kind of an illegal overtime inning, is there such a thing, an illegal extra inning, let us say, that vitiates the cosmic rules of life and death. Or maybe it's all just a brain tumor. And maybe it's not about any of that, but what the British owe America and Americans as of 1945, and vice versa. Note also that America's representative in heaven presents as his chief indictment of the uselessness of British culture the game of cricket. He doesn't mention baseball, but that's the implication. We have the better game, the real game. The film sounds sappy, but it isn't. The art direction, particularly of the afterworld, is spectacular, and I urge you to seek it out. If you have access to Turner Classic Movies, they have it on their streamable film site now. Sometimes they keep things up there entirely too long. Sometimes they come and go rather quickly. So I urge you to seek it out while you can. Let me know what you think. So the film ends. My wife and I are sitting on the couch discussing it, as we often do. and we were a little slow turning off the television, and TCM rolls right into the 1951 baseball film Angels in the Outfield. Now, this might surprise you, but I've never seen Angels in the Outfield, or had never seen it. The idea of goofy, metaphysical baseball crossed with religion just didn't appeal to me. And I remembered the trailers for the Disney remake in which the Angels are depicted literally on film doing baseball things or throwing players up in the air so they can catch uncatchable balls, and it just turned me off. I didn't think I would enjoy it. Stephanie, though, when I kind of wasn't looking, my wife, got engaged with it and kind of dragged me along into it, and I'm glad she did. It's really a very pleasant, very well-done film, and as someone who appreciates baseball history, it gave me a lot to think about, and I will talk about that more right after we take a quick break, a brief intermission, and as they say at the movies, let's all go out to the lobby and get ourselves a drink and a snack. Let me give you the premise for those of you who have not seen this 75-year-old film, or close to 75 years. First, the Pittsburgh Pirates suck. I know that requires you to really suspend your disbelief, but in the universe in which this film takes place, the Pittsburgh Pirates, the most successful franchise in baseball, are just a miserable team. I know, right? It's just so ridiculous. It makes Howard the Duck look like a documentary. Their manager, played by Paul Douglas, is sort of a John McGraw type on steroids. He's angry, he's profane, and he's violent. He's an embarrassment to himself and to baseball. His swearing is so bad and the motion picture code so strong that whenever he talks to an umpire or yells at his players, they mask it by kind of adding a lot of echo and running him backwards at the same time. So it sounds like this. And people said Casey Stengel was hard to understand. I thought he was speaking in tongues before the faith part of the movie even began. And then, just as things are starting to bottom out for him, he starts hearing heavenly voices telling him to reform. And the voice, played by James Whitmore, who you might remember as the old guy in the library in The Shawshank Redemption, though I prefer to think of him as the guy who argues way too much about leaving the space colony in the Twilight Zone episode On Thursday, We Leave for Home. Well, he or his voice promises that if the manager cleans up, the Pirates will start winning. The viewers never see the Angels, and the film is much better for it. The film gives you some real Pirates footage from that period. I spotted shortstop George Strickland, who's better remembered for being on the 1954 Cleveland team, hitting a double, which is neat because he didn't hit many of those, or really many of any kind of hit. You see the Pirates' first baseman make a putout, and when he does, he looks right at the camera, and even though the shot is from a good distance, you can see, plain as the nose on the guy's face, that it's Ralph Kiner. Kiner and Bert from Sesame Street had the exact same nose. And you can see both from outer space. In fact, from as far away as James Whitmore's space colony in On Thursday, We Leave for Home. And maybe that's why he didn't want to go. Life here is so beautiful. On a clear day, you can see Ralph Kiner's nose. The fact that he was playing first base narrows down which game it was considerably, because Kiner played all of 58 games at first base in his career, the entirety of them from April to June 1951. So it's possible that if you worked harder at it than I had time to do, you could narrow down which game it was. In another shot, I'm pretty sure I saw Cardinals outfielder Enos Slaughter leg out a double. You also get a lot of the long-gone Forbes Field, some Little Wrigley Field in Los Angeles, which was very briefly the home of the Los Angeles Angels or the California Angels when they first came into the league, and was the home of Home Run Derby on television when that was a thing. And it was a Pacific Coast League park for a long time before that. And for no reason at all, they show you some footage of play at Comiskey Park. This is a National League movie. Oh, and Joe DiMaggio and Ty Cobb briefly appear as well. Ty Cobb, Not in stock footage. I mean, as themselves commenting on the movie. No, not together like Siskel and Ebert. They're not reviewing it. They're pretending that the movie is really happening and they have some thoughts about it. Paul Douglas, who had quite a career in sports films, including a famously abortive baseball episode of the original Twilight Zone that had to be refilmed with Jack Warden, is very believable as a beleaguered manager with a hidden heart of gold. That said, I kept thinking that if some ambassador for God had gone to John McGraw, who does get name-checked in the movie, and said, stop swearing, stop fighting, stop being crude and rude to people, he might have taken his own life. It would have been like telling him not to breathe. Now, that said, it kind of happened. I don't know about the divine intervention part, and he never really stopped being a jerk, but look at his ejection logs. In the Giants' years, from 1903 through 1916, which is the first half, basically, he led the National League in ejections 8 times, getting heaved as many as 12 times in a single season. I count an even 100 ejections during that period. After that, though, he changed. From 1917 through the end of his career in 1932, he totaled 11 ejections. He went 4 years, 1923 to 1926, without being ejected at all. Did a seraph give him a talking to? Or was it only Judge Landis? We'll never know. It may well have been his doctor. Try not to be too excitable there, John. I know it's second nature to you, but if you want to hang around much longer, you got to just be a little more chill. The film is of a piece with Damn Yankees, which originated on Broadway in 1955 and became a movie in 1958, and Major League from 1989. All of them work because they're about real teams, the Pirates, the Washington Senators, and the Cleveland Indians, who couldn't get out of their own way. And their fans were so frustrated and impotent feeling because seemingly nothing would change or alter what were basically a combination of poor management and weak owners, that it was preferable to resort to fantasy. It was better than what they were experiencing in the real world. And no doubt that's why the next remake, Angels in the Federal Government, will be a great big hit. It will be much preferable to what we're going through in the real world. Now, the Pirates did, at the moment this movie happened, have good management because Branch Rickey was running the thing. And in fact, he was part of the reason the movie got made. Not only was he a religious man and therefore the spiritual aspect appealed to him, but when he heard that the studio, MGM, was trying to decide between making it about the Cubs and making it about the Pirates, I think he went out of his way to encourage them to come to Pittsburgh, because what else did he have to offer? As you know, the Pirates went to the World Series and won it over the Senators in 1925. They lost to the Yankees in 4 in 1927, and then poof, they vanished until 1960. That was the year they beat the Yankees in 7 on Bill Mazeroski's famous home run. They were often decent through the 30s with a couple of late-season fades where it would have seemed that they were about to win another pennant. They just never did. And in the mid-40s, they finally started to crash. It was the 50s, though, when they bottomed out, and in part that was due to Branch Rickey's rebuilding. Whereas my willing suspension of disbelief could handle Angels in the Outfield, it couldn't sustain the idea of the 1951 Pirates overhauling the Giants for the pennant. The Pirates had Kiner, who hit .309 with a .452 on base and a .627 slugging percentage with 42 home runs in 1951, a huge season, an 8-win season, and several pitchers who had been better in the past or would be in the future. In the latter category, Vern Law and Bob Friend, both of whom would be on that championship 1960 team. But they didn't have a whole lot else, and they would really bottom out starting in 1952, the first of 3 straight 100-loss seasons. The Giants, who would win the 1951 and 1954 pennants with Willie Mays and Monty Irvin and Alvin Dark, Sal Magley, Johnny Antonelli, they had nothing to worry about, at least not from the Pirates. Maybe the Pirates had a few Angels, but the Giants had the entire Greek pantheon. It was like Captain Marvel, the wisdom of Solomon, the strength of Hercules, the fortitude of Atlas. I'm not going to do the whole thing, but you know how it works. You just say the magic word. It's just in this case, you have to imagine Leo DeRocher saying it. On a personal note, the best present I got this holiday season, which also includes my birthday, came as I watched this film. I think a lot of you can identify with this. These reminders that you made a good choice in choosing a life partner and that you shouldn't take anything for granted, even if you've been with someone a long time. Stephanie and I met when we were about 22, and we've been married for 27 years. As you well know, life creates a lot of centrifugal force. It can pull you apart. Any couple, no matter how firm their foundation when they start, is lucky to withstand those winds. Withstanding is not the same thing as settling. I don't mean buckling down and staying together for the kids or saying that your faith forbids you from divorcing and trying again with someone who better suits you at this time in your life, or who would, heaven forfend, just be kind to you, because sometimes couples lose that. Or not to be cynical, but one of them during the courtship phase disguised very well the fact that they weren't kind, that they did a very good imitation of a kind person, and then once they got a ring on it and got comfortable, they got complacent and they let the mask slip, and then you find out, whoops, you're not with who you thought you were. And I think that happens every day. I'm not saying put up with that for inertia's sake. Inertia is a powerful force, and it makes sense because divorce is painful and expensive and inconvenient. You mean I'll have to move all my stuff? And starting over is frightening, especially as one gets older. But I strongly believe that you should never settle. I hope that everyone always strives for their optimum state of happiness, because you only go around once, and you ought to have the best, most joyous trip that you can with someone who's in it with you all the way. But I understand, again, all the reasons that we don't. What I'm talking about is not settling, but the sedulous effort to keep rediscovering the constants in your relationship, to remind yourself of why you fell in love with this person, remembering the things that are still true, that haven't changed. No mask was slipped. No man behind the curtain turned out to be different than you thought they were. But it's easy to take it for granted. And so you have to keep rediscovering it and keep reminding yourself, and also reminding yourself of all the new things that have been added to that feeling in the intervening years, as hopefully you shared experiences and grew together. And so you make sure that instead of a memory or a museum to something you felt when you were a kid, or at least in your 20s, it's a current living thing. It's not something that happened to other versions of the two of you a long time ago. Or if you're in a polycule, the two or more of you a long time ago. And parenthetically, I'm not making fun of that. If that's how you found your bliss in this world with more than one person, it seems effortful to me. I can imagine it also being good in some ways. So more power to you. I think in this life, finding happiness is hard enough. It's not how you find it. It's that you found it at all. I've told you before that in the past, I've failed at this remembering sometimes, at keeping my relationship in the present rather than in the past. And that's been at times when I've been in the depths of severe depression. That's when one, in desperation, tries to self-medicate. They try to figure out what's wrong and how to fix it because you're in such pain. And then you think, maybe it's not me. Maybe it's all this sameness. Maybe this is all grown stale and I need to get some newness from outside. And what you're really doing is trying to plug novelty into the hole that depression has ripped in your consciousness. Others might try drink or drugs or taking up skydiving, but blowing up your most important, your closest personal relationships, that's a time-honored way as well. And it's one that I was vulnerable to due to some other things I'd been carrying for a very long time. I'm very grateful that eventually I came back to myself and knew what I had known from virtually the day that I met this person, that I am with the right person, the perfect person. And now, because I will spend the rest of my life feeling bad about that, I try to be even more attentive to the reminders that I just talked about, those new points that go up on the living scoreboard that tallies up the record in that game of, am I with the right person? Oh yeah, I am. And it turns out that Stephanie getting me to watch Angels in the Outfield brought me my holiday present in that regard. So Steph and I were watching the movie, and at one point in the film, Paul Douglas, the manager, has to make a choice: stay with the starting pitcher or go to the bullpen. For reasons I won't spoil, this decision has a greater weight to it than, say, Joe Torre choosing to go to Jeff Weaver instead of Mariano Rivera in Game 4 of the 2003 World Series, and yes, not over it. There's something more riding on whether this pitching change is made or not, and it's in a winner-take-all game between the Giants and the Pirates for the pennant. And as Douglas is mulling over that decision, agonizing over it, Keenan Wynn, the longtime character actor, as the radio play-by-play man who is the film's earthly antagonist, points out that if Douglas doesn't make a change, he'll be leaving in a tired pitcher to face Gavi Rascallo, who leads the league in runs batted in. And my wife, my wonderful, brilliant scientist of a wife, leaned forward on the couch and shouted at the screen, "It's a junk stat!" And I thought, oh my, did I marry the right person? How did I ever go even a second without knowing that? How did I get through 22 whole years before I found it? Thank you for joining me for this attenuated episode of The Infinite Inning. I will be back with another of the same on a totally different subject, no doubt, next week at this time. Should you wish to follow me on social media, also at this time, you can do so at stephengoldman.bsky.social. You can also write us, by which I mean me, at infiniteinning@gmail.com. And there's a Facebook group. You know the drill. Simply go to Facebook, search on Infinite Inning. Bang, you're there. Should you wish to support the show, you can do so by going to patreon.com/theinfiniteinning. And I thank all of you very much. Once again, new player comments coming for supporters in the new year. Here of a rudimentary kind available at the-infinite-inning.creator-spring.com. Original soundtrack available gratis at casualobservermusic.bandcamp.com. Finally, should you find yourself with the proverbial moment to spare, and at this time of year, who has that, but go to your podcatcher and rate, review, and subscribe. And if your podcatcher doesn't let you do those things, in consideration of the time of year, please put a penny in the old man's hat. And if you haven't got a penny, a hey penny will do, even though the government has taken all of the above out of circulation. But remember, he's a Civil War veteran. He fought at Chickamauga. Our theme song, which you are hearing now and have been listening to throughout the episode, was a co-composition of myself and Dr. Rick Mooring, who reminds you, well, if I can just get a translator for that, but allow me to translate this much. Please have a safe, healthy, and loving New Year, and I'll be back next week so that we may all reconvene inside the Infinite Inning. Happy New Year.